It's Whisper again. Welcome back. Today I am continuing my reading of Aragon. So let's get started. The next chapter is Palancar Valley. The sun rose the next morning with a glorious conflagration of pink and yellow. The air was fresh, sweet, and very cold. Ice edged the streams, and small pools were completely frozen over. After a breakfast of porridge, Aragon returned to the glen and examined the charred area. The morning light revealed no new details, so he started for home. The rough game trail was faintly worn and in places non-existent. Because it had been forged by animals, it often backtracked and took long detours. Yet for all its flaws, it was still the fastest way out of the mountains. The spine was one of the only places that King Galbatorix could not call his own. Stories were still told about how half his army disappeared after marching into its ancient forest. A cloud of misfortune and bad luck seemed to hang over it. Though the trees grew tall and the sky shone brightly, few people could stay in the spine for long without suffering an accident. Aragon was one of those few, not through any particular gift, it seems to him, but because of persistent vigilance and sharp reflexes. He had hiked in the mountains for years, yet he was still wary of them. Every time he thought they had surrendered their secrets, something happened to upset his understanding of them, like the stone's appearance. He kept up a brisk pace, and the leagues steadily disappeared. In late evening he arrived at the edge of a precipitous ravine. The Anora River rushed by far below, heading to Palancar Valley. Gorged with hundreds of tiny streams, the river was a brute force, battling against the rocks and boulders that barred its way. A low rumble filled the air. He camped in a thicket near the ravine and watched the moon rise before going to bed. It grew colder over the next day and a half. Aragon traveled quickly and saw little of the wary wildlife. A bit past noon he heard the Igolda Falls, blanketing everything with the dull sound of 1,000 splashes. The trail led him into a moist slate outcropping, which the river sped past, flinging itself into empty air and down mossy cliffs. Before him lay Palancar Valley, exposed like an unrolled map. The base of the Igolda Falls, more than a half-mile below, was the northernmost point of the valley. A little ways from the falls was Caravahal, a cluster of brown buildings. White smoke rose from the chimneys, defiant of the wilderness around it. At this height, farms were small square patches with no bigger than the end of his finger. The land around them was tan or sandy, where dead grass swayed in the wind. The Anora River wound from the falls toward Palancar's southern end, reflecting great strips of sunlight. Far in the distance it flowed past the village Theransford and the lonely mountain Utgard. Beyond that, he knew only that it turned north and ran into the sea. After a pause, Aragon left the outcropping and started down the trail, grimacing at the descent. When he arrived at the bottom, soft dusk was creeping over everything, blurring colors and shapes into gray masses. Carvahal's light shimmered nearby in the twilight. The houses cast long shadows. Aside from Theransford, Carvahal was the only village in Palancar Valley. The settlement was secluded and surrounded by harsh, beautiful land. Few traveled here except merchants and trappers. The village was composed of stout log buildings with low roofs, some thatched, others shingled. Smoke billowed from the chimneys, giving the air a woody smell. The buildings had wide porches where people gathered to talk and conduct business. Occasionally, a window brightened as a candle or lamp was lit. Aragon heard men talking loudly in the evening air while wives scurried to fetch their husbands, scolding them for being late. Aragon wove his way between the houses to the butcher's shop, a broad, thickly beamed building. belched black smoke. He pushed the door open. The spacious room was warm and well lit by a fire snapping in a stone fireplace. A bare counter stretched across the far side of the room. The floor was strewn with loose straw. Everything was scrupulously clean, as if the owner spent his leisure time digging in obscure crannies for minuscule pieces of filth. Behind the counter stood the butcher Sloane, a small man. He wore a cotton shirt and a long, blood-stained smock. An impressive array of knives swung from his belt. He had a sallow, pock-marked face, and his black eyes were suspicious. He polished the counter with a ragged cloth. Sloane's mouth twisted as Aragon entered. While the mighty hunter joins the rest of us mortals, how many did you pack this time? None, was Aragon's curt reply. He had never liked Sloane. The butcher always treated him with disdain, as if he were something unclean. A widower, Sloane seemed to care only for one person, his daughter Katrina, on whom he doted. I am amazed, said Sloane with affected astonishment. He turned his back on Aragon to scrape something off the wall. And that's your reason for coming here? Yes, admitted Aragon uncomfortably. If that's the case, let's see your money. Sloane tapped his fingers when Aragon shifted his feet and remained silent. Come on. Either you don't have it, or you do. Which is it? I don't really have any money, but I do. What? No money? The butcher cut him off sharply. And you expect to buy meat? Are the other merchants giving away their wares? Should I just hand you the goods without charge? Besides, he said abruptly, it's late. Come back tomorrow with money. I'm closed for the day. Aragon glared at him. I can't wait until tomorrow's dawn. It'll be worth your while, though. I've found something to pay you with. He pulled out the stone with a flourish and set it gently on the card counter, where it gleamed with lights from dancing flames. Stole it is more likely, muttered Sloane, leaning forward with an interested expression. Ignoring the comment, Aragon asked, will this be enough? Sloane picked up the stone and gauged its weight speculatively. He ran his hands over its smoothness and inspected the white veins. With a calculating look, he set it down. It's pretty. How much is it worth? I don't know, admitted Aragon, but no one would have gone to the trouble of shaping it unless it had some value. Obviously, said Sloane with an exaggerated patience, but how much value? Since you don't know, I suggest that you find a trader who does, or take my offer of 3 crowns. That's a miser's bargain. It must be worth at least 10 times that, protested Aragon. 3 crowns would not even buy enough meat to last a week. Sloane struggled. If you don't like my offer, wait until the traders arrive. Either way, I'm tired of this conversation. The traders were a nomadic group of merchants and entertainers who visited Caraval every spring and winter. They bought whatever excess the villagers and local farmers had managed to grow or make, and sold what they needed to live through another year: seeds, animals, fabrics, and supplies like salt and sugar. But Aragon did not want to wait until they arrived. It could be a while, and his family needed the meat now. Fine, I accept, he snapped. Good, I'll get you the meat. Not that it matters, but where did you find this? 2 nights ago in the spine. Get out, demanded Sloane, pushing the stone away. He stopped furiously at the end of the counter and started scrubbing old bloodstains off a knife. Why? Asked Aragon. He drew the stone closer, as if to protect it from Sloane's wrath. I won't deal with anything you bring back from those damned mountains. Take your sorcerer's stone elsewhere. Sloane's hand suddenly slipped and he cut a finger on the knife. But he seemed not to notice. He continued to scrub, staining the blade with fresh blood. You refused to sell to me. Yes, unless you pay with coins. Sloane growled and hefted to the knife, sidling away. Go, before I make you. The door behind them slammed open. Aragon rolled around, ready for more trouble, and stomped a hulking man. Sloane's daughter, Katrina, a tall girl of 16, trailed behind them with a determined expression. Aragon was surprised to see her. She usually absented herself from any arguments involving her father. Sloane glanced at them warily, then started to accuse Aragon. "He won't." "Quiet," announced Horst in a rumbling voice, cracking his knuckles at the same time. He was Caraval's smith, as his thick neck and scarred leather apron attested. His powerful arms were bare to the elbow. A great expanse of hairy, muscular chest was visible through the top of his shirt. A black beard, carelessly trimmed, roiled and knotted like his jaw muscles. "Sloane, what have you done now?" "Nothing." He gave Aragon a murderous gaze, then spat. "This boy came in here and started badgering me. I asked him to leave, but he won't budge. I even threatened him and he still ignored me." Sloane seemed to shrink as he looked at Horst. "Is this true?" demanded the smith. "No," replied Aragon. "I offered the stone as payment for some meat, and he accepted it. When I told him that I'd found it at the spine, he refused to even touch it. What difference does it make where it came from?" Horst looked at the stone curiously, then returned his attention to the butcher. "Why won't you trade with him, Sloane? I've no love for the spine in myself, but it's a question of the stone's worth. I'll back it with my own money." The question hung in the air for a moment, then Sloane licked his lips and said, "This is my own store. I could do whatever I want." Katrina stepped out from behind Horst and tossed back her auburn hair like a spray of molten copper. "Father, Aragon is willing to pay. Give him the meat, and then we can have supper." Sloane's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Go back to the house. This is none of your business." "I said go." Katrina's face hardened. Then she marched out of the room with a stiff back. Aragon watched with disapproval, but dared not interfere. Horst tugged at his beard before saying reproachfully, "Fine, you could deal with me. What were you going to get, Aragon?" His voice reverberated through the room. "As much as I could." Horst pulled a purse and counted out a pile of coins. "Give me your best roast and steaks. Make sure that it's enough to fill Aragon's pack." The butcher hesitated, his gaze darting between Horst and Aragon. "Not selling to me would be a very bad idea," stated Horst. Glowering venomously, Sloane slipped into the back room. A frenzy of chopping, rapping, and low cursing reached them. After several uncomfortable minutes, he returned with an armful of wrapped meat. His face was expressionless as he accepted Horst's money, then proceeded to clean his knife, pretending that they were not there. Horst scooped up the meat and walked outside. Aragon hurried behind him, carrying his pack and the stone. The crisp night air rolled over their faces, refreshing after the stuffy shop. "Thank you, Horst. Uncle Garrett will be pleased." Horst laughed quietly. "Don't thank me. I've wanted to do that a long time. Sloane's a vicious troublemaker. It does him good to be humbled." Katrina heard what was happening and went to fetch me. "Good thing I came. The two of you were almost at blows. Unfortunately, I doubt it'll serve you or any of your family the next time you go in there, even if you do have coins." "Why did he explode like that?" "We've never been friendly, but he's always taken our money, and I've never seen him treat Katrina that way," said Aragon, opening the top of the pack. Horst shrugged. "Ask your uncle. He knows more about it than I do." Aragon stuffed the meat into his pack. "Well, now I have one more reason to hurry home to solve this mystery. Hear that this is rightfully yours." He proffered the stone. Horst chuckled. "No, you keep your strange rock. As for payment, Albrecht plans to leave for Feinster next spring. He wants to become a master smith, and I'm going to need an assistant. You can come work and pay off the debt on your spare days." Aragon bowed slightly, delighted. Horst had 2 sons, Albrecht and Baldur, both of whom worked in his forge. Taking one's place was a generous offer. "Again, thank you. I look forward to working with you." He was glad that there was a way for him to pay Horst. His uncle would never accept charity. Then Aragon remembered what his cousin had told him before. he had left on the hunt. Roran wanted me to give Katrina a message, but I can't. Can you get it to her? Of course. He wants her to know that he'll come into town as soon as the merchants arrive, and that he will see her then. That's all? Aragon was slightly embarrassed. No, he also wants to know that she's the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, and that he thinks of nothing else. Horseface broke out in a broad grin, and he winked at Aragon. Getting serious, isn't he? Yes, sir, Aragon answered with a quick smile. Could you also give her my thanks? It was nice of her to stand up to Father for me. I hope that she isn't punished because of it. Roran would be furious if I got her in trouble. I wouldn't worry about it. Sloane doesn't know that she called me, so I doubt it'll be too hard on her. Before you go, will you sup with us? I'm sorry, but I can't. Garrow is expecting me, said Aragon, tying off the top of the pack. He hoisted it onto his back and started down the hall, raising his hand in farewell. The meat slowed him down, but he was eager to be home, and renewed vigor filled his steps. The village ended abruptly, and he left his warm lights behind. The pearlescent moon peeked over the mountains, bathing the land in a ghostly reflection of daylight. Everything looked bleached and flat. Near the end of his journey, he turned off the road, which was continued south. A simple path led straight through waist-high grass and up a knoll, almost hidden by the shadows of protective elm trees. He crested the hill and saw a gentle light shining from his home. The house had a shingled roof and a brick chimney. Eaves hung over the whitewashed walls, shattering the ground below. One side of the enclosed porch was filled with split wood, ready for the fire. A jumble of farm tools cluttered the other side. The house had been abandoned for half a century when they moved in after Garrow's wife, Marian, died. It was at 10 miles from Carvajal, farther than anyone else's. People considered the distance dangerous because the family could not rely on help from the village in times of trouble, but Aragon's uncle would not listen. 100 feet from the house, in a dull-colored barn, lived 2 horses, Burka and Brug, with chickens and a cow. Sometimes there was also a pig, but they have been unable to afford one this year. A wagon sat wedged between the stalls. On the edge of their fields, a thick line of trees traced along the Noir River. He saw a light move behind a window as he rarely reached the porch. Uncle, it's Aragon. Let me in. A small shutter slid back for a second, and then the door swung inward. Garrow stood with his hand on the door. His warm clothes hung on him like rags on a stick frame. A lean, hungry face with intense eyes gazed out from under graying hair. He looked like a man who had been partly mummified before it was discovered that he was still alive. Roran sleeping was his answer to Aragon's inquiring glance. A lantern flickered on a wood table, so old that the grain stood up in tiny ridges like a giant fingerprint. Near a wood stove were rows of cooking utensils stacked into the wall like with homemade nails. A second door opened to the rest of the house. The floor was made of boards polished smooth by years of tramping feet. Aragon pulled off his pack and took out the meat. What's this? Did you buy meat? Where did you get the money? Asked his uncle harshly as he saw the wrapped packages. Aragon took a breath before answering. No, Horse brought it for us. You let him pay for it. I told you before, I won't beg for food. If we can't feed ourselves, we might as well move into town. Before you can turn around twice, they'll be sending us used clothes and asking if we'll be able to get through the winter. Garrow's face paled with anger. I didn't accept charity, snapped Aragon. Horse agreed to let me work off the debt this spring. He needs someone to help him because Albrecht is going away. And where will you get the time to work for him? Are you going to ignore all the things that need to be done here? Asked Garrow, forcing his voice down. Aragon hung his bow and quiver on hooks beside the front door. I don't know how I'll do it, he he said irritably. Besides, I found something that could be worth some money. He set the stone on the table. Garo bowed over it. The hungry look on his face became ravenous, and his fingers moved with a strange twitch. You found this in the spine? Yes, said Aragon. He explained what had happened, and to make matters worse, I lost my best arrow. I'll have to make more before long. They stared at the stone in the near darkness. How was the weather? Asked his uncle, lifting the stone. His hands tightened around it like he was afraid it would suddenly disappear. Cold was Aragon's reply. It didn't snow, but it froze each night. Garo looked worried by the news. Tomorrow you'll have to help Warren finish harvesting the barley. If we can get the squash picked too, the frost won't bother us. He passed the stone to Aragon. Here, keep it. When the traders come, we'll find out what it's worth. Selling it is probably the best thing to do. The less we're involved with magic, the better. Why did Horst pay for the meat? It took only a moment for Aragon to explain his argument with Sloane. I just don't understand what angered him so. Garo shrugged. Sloane's wife, Ismara, went over the Igalda Falls a year before you were brought here. He hasn't been near the spine since, or had anything to do with it, but that's no reason to refuse payment. I think he wanted to give you trouble. Aragon swayed blurrily and said, It's good to be back. Garo's eyes softened and he nodded. Aragon stumbled to his room, pushed the stone under his bed, then fell into the mattress. Home, for the first time since before the hunt, he relaxed completely as sleep overtook him. Next chapter is Dragon Tales. At dawn, the sun's rays streamed through the window, warming Aragon's face. Rubbing his eyes, he sat up on the edge of the bed. The pine floor was cold under his feet. He stretched his sore legs and rubbed his back, yawning. Beside the bed was a row of shelves covered with objects he had collected. There were twisted pieces of wood, odd bits of shells, rocks that had been broken to reveal shiny interiors, and strips of dry grass knotted into knots. His favorite item was a root so convoluted that he never tired of looking at it. The rest of the room was bare except for a small dresser and nightstand. He pulled on his boots and stared at the floor, thinking this was a special day. It was near this very hour, 16 years ago, that his mother, Selena, had come home to Caraval alone and pregnant. She had been gone for 6 years, living in the cities. When she returned, she wore expensive clothes and her hair was bound by a net of pearls. She had sought out her brother, Garo, and asked to stay with him until the baby arrived. Within months, her son was born. Everyone was shocked when Selena tearfully begged Garo and Marion to raise him. When they asked why, she only wept and said, I must. Her pleas had grown increasingly desperate until they finally agreed. She named him Aragon, then departed early the next morning and never returned. Aragon still remembered how he had felt when Marion told him the story before she died. The realization that Garo and Marion were not his real parents had disturbed him greatly. Things that had been permanent and unquestionable were suddenly thrown into doubt. Eventually, he had learned to live with it, but he had always had a nagging suspicion that he had not been good enough for his mother. I'm sure there was a good reason for what she did. I only wish I knew what it was. The other thing bothered him. Who was his father? Selena had told no one, and whoever it might be had never come looking for Aragon. He wished that he knew who it was, if only to have a name. It would be nice to know his heritage. He sighed and went to the nightstand, where he splashed his face, shivering as the water ran down his neck. Refreshed, he retrieved the stone from under the bed and held it on a shelf. The morning light caressed it, throwing a warm shadow on the wall. He touched it one more time, then hurried to the kitchen, eager to see his family. Garo and Roran were already there, eating chicken. As Aragon greeted them, Roran stood with a grin. Roran was 2 years older than Aragon, muscular, sturdy, and careful with his movements. They could not have been closer even if they had been real brothers. Roran smiled. I'm glad you're back. How was the trip? Hard, replied Aragon. Did Uncle tell you what happened? He helped himself to a piece of chicken, which he devoured hungrily. No, said Roran, and the story was quickly told. At Roran's insistence, Aragon left his food to show him to stone. This elicited a satisfactory amount of awe, but Roran soon asked nervously, Were you able to talk with Katrina? No, there wasn't an opportunity after the argument with Sloane, but she'll expect you when the traders come. I gave the message to Horst. He will get it to her. You told Horst? Said Roran incredulously. That was private. If I wanted everyone to know about it, I could have built a bonfire and used smoke signals to communicate. If Sloane ever finds out, he won't let me see her again. Horst will be discreet, assured Aragon. He won't let anyone fall prey to Sloane, least of all you. Roran seemed unconvinced, but argued no more. They returned to their meals in the taciturn presence of Garrow. When the last bites were finished, all three went to work in the fields. The sun was cold and pale, providing little comfort. Under its watchful eye, the last of the barley was stored in the barn. Next, they gathered prickly, fine squash, then rutabagas, beets, peas, turnips, and beans, which they packed into the root cellar. After hours of labor, they stretched their cramped muscles, pleased that the harvest was finished. The following days were spent pickling, salting, shelling, and preparing the food for winter. 9 days after Aragon's return, a vicious blizzard blew out of the mountains and settled over the valley. The snow came down in great sheets, blanketing the countryside in white. They only dared leave the house for firewood and to feed the animals, for they feared getting lost in the howling wind and featureless landscape. They spent their time huddled over the stove as gusts rattled heavy window shutters. Days later, the storm finally passed, revealing an alien world of soft white drifts. I'm afraid the traders may not come this year with conditions this bad, said Garrow. They're late as it is. We'll give them a chance and wait before going to Carvajal. But if they don't show soon, we'll have to buy any spare supplies from the townspeople. His countenance was resigned. They grew anxious as the days crept by without sign of the traders. Talk was sparse, and depression hung over the house. On the 8th morning, Roran walked to the road and confirmed that the traders had not yet passed. The day was spent readying for the trip into Carvajal, scrounging with grim expressions for saleable items. That evening, out of desperation, Aragon checked the road again. He found deep ruts cut into the snow with numerous hoofprints between them. Elated, he ran back to the house whooping, bringing new life to their preparations. They packed their surplus produce into the wagon before sunrise. Garrow put the year's money in a leather pouch that he had carefully fastened to his belt. Aragon set the wrapped stone between bags of grain so it would not roll when the wagon hit bumps. After a hasty breakfast, they harnessed the horses and cleared a path to the road. The traders' wagons had already broken the drifts which sped their progress. By noon, they could see Carvajal. In daylight, it was a small, earthy village filled with shouts and laughter. The traders had made camp in an empty field on the outskirts of town. Groups of wagons, tents, and fires were randomly spread across it, spots of color against the snow. The troubadours' 4 tents were garishly decorated. A steady stream of people linked the camp to the village. Crowds churned around a line of bright tents and booths clogging the main street. Horses whinnied at the noise. The snow had been pounded flat, giving it a glassy surface. Elsewhere, bonfires had melted it. Roasted hazelnuts added a rich aroma to the smells wafting around them. Garrow parked the wagon and picketed the horses, then drew coins from his pouch. Get yourself some treats, Roran. Do what you want. Only be at Horst in time for supper. Aragon, bring that stone and come with me. Aragon grinned at Roran and pocketed the money, already planning how to spend it. parted immediately with a determined expression on his face. Garo led Aragon into the throng, shouldering his way through the bustle. Women were buying cloth, while nearby their husbands examined a new latch, hook, or tool. Children ran up and down the road, streaking with excitement. Knives were displayed here, spices there, and pots were laid out in shiny rows next to leather harnesses. Aragon stared at the traders curiously. They seemed less prosperous than last year. Their children had a frightened, wary look, and their clothes were patched. The gaunt men carried swords and daggers with a new familiarity, and even the women had poniards belted at their waist. What could have happened to make them like this, and why are they so late? Wondered Aragon. He remembered the traders as being full of good cheer, but there was none of that now. Garo pushed down the street, searching for Murlock, a trader who specialized in odd trinkets and pieces of jewelry. They found him behind a booth displaying brooches to a group of women. As each new piece was revealed, exclamations of admiration followed. Aragon guessed that more than a few purses would be depleted. Murlock seemed to flourish and grow every time his wares were complimented. He wore a goatee, held himself with ease, and seemed to regard the rest of the world with slight contempt. The excited group prevented Garo and Aragon from getting near the trader, so they settled on a step and waited. As soon as Murlock was unoccupied, they hurried over. "And what might you sirs want to look at?" asked Murlock. "An amulet or trinket for a lady?" With a twirl, he pulled out a delicately carved silver rose of excellent workmanship. The polished metal caught Aragon's attention, and he eyed it appreciatively. The trader continued, "Not even 3 crowns, though it has come all the way from famed craftsmen of Belladonna." Garo spoke in a quiet voice. "We aren't looking to buy, but to sell." Murlock immediately covered the rose and looked at them with new interest. "I see. Maybe if this item is of any value, you would like to trade it for 1 or 2 of these exquisite pieces." He paused for a moment while Aragon and his uncle stood uncomfortably, then continued, "You did bring the object of consideration." "We have it, but we would rather show it to you elsewhere," said Garo in a firm voice. Murlock raised an eyebrow, but spoke smoothly. "In that case, let me invite you into my tent." He gathered up his wares and gently laid them in an iron-bound chest, which he locked. Then he ushered them into the street and to the temporary camp. They went between the wagons to a tent removed from the rest of the traders. It was crimson at the top and sable at the bottom, with thin triangles of color stabbing onto each other. Murlock untied the opening and swung the flap to one side. Small trinkets and strange pieces of furniture, such as a round bed and 3 seats carved from tree stumps, filled the tent. A gnarled dagger with a ruby in the pommel rested on a white cushion. Murlock closed the flap and turned to them. "Please, seat yourselves." When they had, he said, "Now show me why we are meeting in private." Aragon unwrapped the stone and set it between the 2 men. Murlock reached for it with a gleam in his eye, then stopped and asked, "May I?" When Garo indicated his approval, Murlock picked it up. He put the stone in his lap and reached to one side for a thin box. Opened, it revealed a large set of copper scales, which he set on the ground. After weighing the stone, he scrutinized its surface under a jeweler's glass, tapped it gently with a wooden mallet, and drew the point of a tiny clear stone over it. He measured its length and diameter, then recorded the figures on the slate. He considered the results for a while. "Do you know what this is worth?" "No," admitted Garo. His cheek twitched, and he shifted uncomfortably on the seat. Murlock grimaced. "Unfortunately, neither do I, but I can tell you this much. The white veins are the same material as the blue that surrounds them, only a different color. What that material might be, though, I haven't a clue. It's harder than any rock I've seen, harder than even a diamond. Whoever shaped it used tools I had never seen, or magic. Also, it's hollow." "What?" slapped the stone with the flat of the blade. A pure note filled the air, then faded away smoothly. Aragon was alarmed, afraid that the stone had been damaged. Murloc tilted the stone towards them. You will find no scratches or blemishes where the dagger struck. I doubt I could do anything to harm the stone, even if I took a hammer to it. Garrow crossed his arms with a reserved expression. A wall of silence surrounded him. Aragon was puzzled. I knew that the stone appeared in the spine through magic, but made by magic. What for and why? He blurted. But what is that worth? I can't tell you that, said Murloc in a pained voice. I'm sure there are people that would pay dearly to have it, but none of them are in Carvajal. We would have to go to the southern cities to find a buyer. This is a curiosity for most people, not an item to spend money on when practical things are needed. Garrow stared at the tent ceiling like a gambler calculating the odds. Will you buy it? The trader answered instantly. It's not worth the risk. I might be able to find a wealthy buyer during my spring travels, but I can't be certain. Even if I did, you wouldn't be paid until I return next year. No, you'll have to find someone else to trade with. I'm curious, however. Why did you insist on talking to me in private? Aragon put the stone away before answering. Because, he glanced at the man, wondering if he would explode like Sloane. I found this in the spine, and folks around here don't like that. Murloc gave him a startled look. Do you know why my fellow merchants and I were late this year? Aragon shook his head. Our wanderings have been dogged with misfortune. Chaos seems to rule Agalacea. We could not avoid elements, attacks, and the most cursed black luck. Because the Varden's attacks have increased, Galbatorix has forced cities to send more soldiers to the borders, men who are needed to combat the Urgles. The brute have been migrating southeast towards the Hadaric Desert. No one knows why, and it wouldn't concern us except that they're passing through populated areas. They've been spotted on roads and near cities. Worst of all are reports of a shade, though the stories are unconfirmed. Not many people survive such an encounter. Why haven't we heard of this? Cried Aragon. Because, said Murloc grimly, it only began a few months ago. Whole villages have been forced to move because Urgles destroyed their fields, and starvation threatens. Nonsense, grubbed Garrow. We haven't seen any Urgles. The only one around here has horns mounted on Morn's tavern. Murloc arched an eyebrow. Maybe so, but this is a small village hidden by mountains. It's not surprising that you've escaped notice. However, I wouldn't expect that to last. I only mention that because strange things have been happening here as well, if you found such a stone in the spine. With that sobering statement, he bid them farewell with a bow and a slight smile. Garrow headed back to Carvajal with Aragon trailing behind. What do you think? Asked Aragon. I'm going to get more information before I make up my mind. Take the stone back to the wagon, then do what you want. I'll meet you for dinner at Horst's. Aragon dodged through the crowd and happily dashed back to the wagon. Trading would take his uncle hours, time that he planned to enjoy fully. He hid the stone under the bags, then set out to town with a cocky stride. He had walked from one booth to another, evaluating the goods with a buyer's eye, despite his meager supply of coins. When he talked with the merchants, they confirmed what Murloc had said about the instability of Alacacia. Over and over, the message was repeated. Last year's security has deserted us, new dangers have appeared, and nothing is safe. Later in the day, he bought 3 sticks of malt candy and a small, piping hot cherry pie. The hot food felt good after hours of standing in the snow. He licked the sticky syrup from his fingers regretfully, wishing for more, then sat on the edge of a porch and nibbled a piece of candy. 2 boys from Carvajal wrestled nearby, but he felt no inclination to join them. As the day descended into late afternoon, the traders took their business into people's homes. Aragon was impatient for evening, when the troubadours would come out to sell stories and perform tricks. He loved hearing about magic, gods, and and if they were especially lucky, the dragon riders. Carval had its own storyteller, Brom, a friend of Aragon's, but his tales grew old over the years, whereas the troubadours always had new ones that he listened to eagerly. Aragon had just broken off an icicle from the underside of the porch when he spotted Sloane nearby. The butcher had not seen him, so Aragon ducked his head and bolted around the corner toward Morn's tavern. The inside was hot and filled with greasy smoke from sputtering tallow candles. The shiny black Urkel horns, their twisted span as great as his outstretched arms, were mounted over the door. The bar was low and long, with a stack of staves on one end for customers to carve. Morn tended the bar, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The bottom half of his face was short and mashed, as if he had rested his chin on a grinding wheel. People crowded solid oak tables and listened to two traders who had finished their business early and had come in for beer. Morn looked up from a mug he was cleaning. "Aragon, good to see you. Where's your uncle?" "Buying," said Aragon with a shrug. "He's going to be a while." "And Roran, is he here?" asked Mom as he swiped the cloth through another mug. "Yes, no sick animals to keep him back this year." Good. Aragon gestured at the two traders. "Who are they?" "Grain buyers. They bought everyone's seed at ridiculously low prices, and now they're telling wild stories, expecting us to believe them." Aragon understood why Morn was so upset. "People need that money. We can't get by without it." "What kind of stories?" Morn snorted. "They say Varden has formed a pact in the Urgles and are amassing an army to attack us. Supposedly it's only through the grace of our king that we've been protected for so long, as if Galbatorix would care if we burned to the ground. Go listen to them. I have enough on my hands without explaining their lies." The first trader filled the chair with his enormous girth. His every movement caused it to protest loudly. There was no hint of hair on his face, his pudgy hands were baby smooth, and he had pouting lips that curled petulantly as he sipped from a flagon. The second man had a florid face. The skin around his jaw was dry and corpulent, filled with lumps of hard fat, like cold butter gone rancid. Contrasted with his neck and jowls, the rest of his body was unnaturally thin. The first trader vainly tried to pull back his expanding borders to fit within the chair. He said, No, you can't understand. It is only through the king's unceasing efforts on your behalf that you are able to argue with us in safety. If he, in all his wisdom, were to withdraw that support, woe unto you." Someone hollered, "Right. Why don't you also tell us that the riders have returned, and you've each killed 100 elves? Do you think we're children to believe in your tales?" "We can take care of ourselves." The group chuckled. The trader started to reply when his thin companion intervened with a wave of his hand. Gaudy jewels flashed onto his fingers. "You misunderstand. We know the Empire cannot care for each of us personally, as you may want, but it can keep Urgles and the other abominations from overrunning this." He searched vaguely for the right term, place. The trader continued, "You're angry with the Empire for treating people unfairly, a legitimate concern, but our government cannot please everyone. There will inevitably be arguments and conflicts. However, the majority of us have nothing to complain about. Every country has some small group of malcontents who aren't satisfied with the balance of power." "Yeah," called a woman, "if you're willing to call the Varden small." The fat man sighed. "We already explained that the Varden have no interest in helping us. That's only a falsehood perpetuated by the traitors in an attempt to disrupt the Empire and convince us that the real threat is inside, not outside our borders. All they want to do is overthrow the king and take possession of our land. They have spies everywhere as they prepare to invade. You never know who might be working for them." Aragon did not agree, but the trader's words were smooth and people were nodding. He stepped forward and said, "How do you know this? I can say that clouds are green, but that doesn't mean it's true. Prove you aren't lying." The two men glared at him while the villagers waited silently for the answer. The thin traitor spoke first. He avoided Aragon's eyes. Aren't your children taught respect, or do you let boys challenge men whenever they want to? The listeners fidgeted and stared at Aragon. Then a man said, Answer the question. It's only common sense, said the fat one, sweat beading on his upper lip. His reply riled the villagers, and the dispute resumed. Aragon returned to the bar with a sour taste in his mouth. He had never before met anyone who favored the Empire and tore down his enemies. There was a deep-seated hatred of the Empire in Carvajal, almost hereditary in nature. The Empire never helped them during harsh years when they nearly starved, and his tax collectors were heartless. He felt justified in disagreeing with the traitors regarding the king's mercy, but he did speculate about the Varden. The Varden were a rebel group that constantly raided and attacked the Empire. It was a mystery who their leader was or who had formed them in the years following Galbatorix's rise to power over a century ago. The group had garnered much sympathy as they eluded Galbatorix's efforts to destroy them. Little was known about the Varden except that if you were a fugitive and had to hide, or if you hated the Empire, they would accept you. The only problem was finding them. Morn leaned over the bar and said, Incredible, isn't it? They're worse than vultures circling a dying animal. There's going to be a trouble if they stay much longer. For us or for them? Them, said Morn, as angry voices filled the tavern. Aragon laughed when the argument threatened to become violent. The door thudded shut behind him, cutting off the voices. It was early evening and the sun was sinking rapidly. The houses cast long shadows on the ground. As Aragon headed down the street, he noticed Roran and Katrina standing in an alley. Roran said something Aragon could not hear. Katrina looked down at her hands and answered in an undertone, then leaned up on her tiptoes and kissed him before darting away. Aragon shouted to Roran and teased, Having a good time? Roran grunted noncommittedly as he paced away. Have you heard the trader's news? Asked Aragon, following. Most of the villagers were indoors, talking to traders or waiting until it was dark enough for the troubadours to perform. Yes, Roran seemed distracted. What do you think of Sloane? I thought it was obvious. There will be bloods between us when he finds out about Katrina and me, said Roran. A snowflake landed on Aragon's nose, and he looked up. The sky had turned gray. He could think of nothing appropriate to say. Roran was right. He clasped his cousin on the shoulder as they continued down the byway. Dinner, hostess was hearty. The room was full of conversation and laughter. Sweet cordials and heavy ales were consumed in copious amounts, adding to the boisterous atmosphere. When the plates were empty, Horse's guests left the house and strolled to the field where traders were camped. A ring of poles topped with candles had been stuck on the ground around a large clearing. Bonfires blazed in the background, painting the ground with dancing shadows. The villagers slowly gathered around the circle and waited expectantly in the cold. The troubadours came tumbling out of their tents, dressed in tasseled clothing, followed by older and more stately minstrels. The minstrels provided music and narration as their younger counterparts acted out the stories. The first plays were pure entertainment, bawdy and full of jokes, pratfalls, and ridiculous characters. Later, however, when the candles sputtered in their sockets and everyone was drawn together in a tight circle, the old storyteller stepped forward. A knotted white beard rippled over his chest, and a long black cape was wrapped around his bent shoulders, obscuring his body. He spread his arms with hands that reached out like talons and recited thus. The sands of time cannot be stopped. Years pass, whether we will them or not, but we can remember. What has been lost may live on in memories. That which you will hear is imperfect and fragmented, yet treasure it, for without you it does not exist. I give you now a memory that has been forgotten, hidden in the dreamy haze that lies behind us. His keen eyes inspected their interested faces. His gaze lingered on Aragon last of all. Before your grandfather's fathers were born, and even before their fathers, the The dragon riders were formed. To protect and guard was their mission, and for thousands of years they succeeded. Their prowess in battle was unmatched, for each had the strength of 10 men. They were immortal unless blade or poison took them. For good only were their powers used, and under their tutelage, tall cities and powers were built out of the living stone. While they kept peace, the land flourished. It was a golden time. The elves were our allies and dwarves our friends. Wealth flowed into cities and men prospered. But weep, for it could not last. Brom looked down silently. Infinite sadness resonated in his voice. Though no enemy could destroy them, they could not guard against themselves. And it came to pass at the height of their power that a boy, Gabatorix by name, was born in the province of Inslabeth, which is no more. At 10 he was tested, as was the custom, and they found that great power resided in him. The riders accepted him as their own. Through their training he passed, exceeding all others in skill. Gifted with a sharp mind and strong body, he quickly took his place among the riders' ranks. Some saw his abrupt rise as dangerous and warned the others, but the riders had grown arrogant in their power and ignored caution. Alas, sorrow was conceived that day. So it was that soon after his training was finished, Gabatorix took a restless trip with his 2 friends. Far north they flew, night and day, and passed into the Urgel's remaining territory, foolishly thinking that their new powers would protect them. They were on a thick sheet of ice, unmelted even in summer. They were ambushed in their sleep. Though his friends and their dragons were butchered and he suffered great wounds, Gabatorix slew his attackers. Tragically, during the fight, a stray arrow pierced his dragon's heart. Without the arts to save her, she died in his arms. Then were the seeds of madness planted. The storyteller clasped his hands and looked around slowly, shadows flickering across his worn face. The next words came like the mournful toll of a requiem. Alone, bereft of much of his strength and half mad with loss, Gabatorix wandered without hope in that desolate land, seeking death. It did not come to him, though he threw himself without fear against any living thing. Urgles and other monsters soon fled from his haunted form. During this time, he came to realize that the riders might grant him another dragon. Driven by this thought, he began the arduous journey on foot, back through the spine. Territory he had soared over effortlessly on a dragon's back now took him months to traverse. He could hunt with magic, but oftentimes he walked in places where animals did not travel. Thus, when his feet finally left the mountains, he was close to death. A farmer found him, collapsed in the mud, and summons the riders. Unconscious, he was taken to their holdings, and his body healed. He slept for 4 days. Upon awakening, he gave no sign of his fevered mind. When he was brought before a council convened to judge him, Gabatorix demanded another dragon. The desperation of the request revealed his dementia, and the council saw him for what he truly was. Denied his hope, Gabatorix, through the twisted mirror of his madness, came to believe it was the rider's fault his dragon had died. Night after night he brooded on that and formulated a plan to exact revenge. Brom's words dropped to a mesmerizing whisper. He found a sympathetic rider, and there his insidious words took root. By persistent reasoning and the use of dark secrets learned from a shade, he inflamed the rider against their elders. Together they treacherously lured and killed an elder. When the foul deed was done, Gabatorix turned on his ally and slaughtered him without warning. The riders found him then, with blood dripping from his hands. A scream tore from his lips, and he fled into the night. As he was cunning in his madness, they could not find him. For years he hid in a wasteland like a hunted animal, always watching for pursuers. His atrocity was not forgotten, but over time searches ceased. Then, through some ill fortune, he met a young rider, Morzan, strong of body but weak of mind. Galbatorix convinced Morzan to leave a gate unbolted in the citadel Illyria, which is now called Uruban. Through this gate, Galbatorix entered and stole a dragon hatchling. He and his new disciple hid themselves in an evil place where the riders dared not venture. There, Morzan entered into a dark apprenticeship, learning secrets and forbidden magic that should never have been revealed. When his instruction was finished and Galbatorix's black dragon, Shurikan, was fully grown, Galbatorix revealed himself to the world with Morzan at his side. Together they fought any rider they met. With each kill, their strength grew. 12 of the riders joined Galbatorix out of their desire for power and revenge against perceived wrongs. Those 12, with Morzan, became the 13 Forsworn. The riders were unprepared and fell beneath the onslaught. The elves, too, fought bitterly against Galbatorix, but they were overthrown and forced to flee in their secret places, from whence they came no more. Only Vril, leader of the riders, could resist Galbatorix and the Forsworn. Ancient and wise, he struggled to save what he could and keep the remaining dragons from falling to his enemies. In the last battle before the gates of Duru Erebah, Vril defeated Galbatorix, but hesitant with the final blow, Galbatorix seized the moment and smote him into the side. Grievously wounded, Vril fled to Utgard Mountain, where he hoped to gather strength, but it was not to be, for Galbatorix found him. As they fought, Galbatorix kicked Vril in the fork of his legs. With that underhanded blow, he gained dominance over Vril and removed his head with a blazing sword. Then, as power rushed through his veins, Galbatorix anointed himself king over all Alagacia, and from that day on, he has ruled us. With the completion of the story, Brom shuffled away from the troubadours. Eragon thought he saw a tear shining on his cheek. People murmured quietly to each other as they departed. Garrow said to Eragon and Roran, "Consider yourselves fortunate. I have heard this tale only twice in my life. If the Empire knew that Brom had recited it, he would not live to see a new month." The next chapter is Fate's Gift. The evening after their return from Carvahall, Eragon decided to test the stone as Murloc had. Alone in his room, he set it on his bed and laid 3 tools next to it. He started with a wooden mallet and lightly tipped the stone. It produced a subtle ringing. Satisfied, he picked up the next tool, a heavy leather hammer. A mournful peal reverberated when it was struck. Lastly, he pounded a small chisel against it. The metal did not chip or scratch the stone, but it produced the clearest sound yet. As the final note died away, he thought he heard a faint squeak. Murloc said the stone was hollow. There could be something of value inside. I don't know how to open it, though. There must have been a good reason for someone to shape it, but whoever sent the stone into the spine hasn't taken the trouble to retrieve it, or doesn't know where it is. But I don't believe that a magician with enough power to transport the stone wouldn't be able to find it again. So, was I meant to have it? He could not answer the question. Resigned to an unsolvable mystery, he picked up the tools and returned the stone to its shelf. That night, he was abruptly roused from his sleep. He listened carefully. All was quiet. Uneasy, he slid his hand under the mattress and grasped his knife. He waited a few minutes, then slowly sank back to sleep. A squeak pierced the silence, tearing him back to wakefulness. He rolled out of bed and yanked the knife from his sheath. Fumbling with a tinderbox, he lit a candle. The door to his room was closed. Though the squeak was too loud for a mouse or rat, he still checked under the bed. Nothing. He sat on the edge of the mattress and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. Another squeak filled the air, and he started violently. Where was the noise coming from? Nothing could be in the floor or walls. They were solid wood. The same went for his bed, and he would have noticed if anything had scrawled into his straw mattress during the night. His eyes settled on the stone. He took it off the shelf and absently cradled it as he studied the room. A squeak ran in his ears and reverberated through his fingers. It came from the stone. The stone had given him nothing but frustration and anger, and now it would not even let him sleep. It ignored his furious glare and sat solidly, occasionally peeping. Then it gave one very loud squeak and fell silent. Aragon rarely put it away and got back under the sheets. Whatever secret the stone held, it would have to wait until morning. The moon was shining through his window when he woke again. The stone was rocking rapidly on the shelf, knocking against the wall. It was bathed in cool moonlight that bleached its surface. Aragon jumped out of bed, knife in hand. The motion stopped, but he remained tense. The stone started squeaking and rocking faster than ever. With an oath, he began dressing. He did not care how valuable the stone might be. He was going to take it far away and bury it. The rocking stopped. The stone became quiet. It quivered, then rolled forward and dropped onto the floor with a loud thump. He inched forward the door in alarm as the stone wobbled toward him. Suddenly a crack appeared on the stone, then another and another. Transfixed, Aragon leaned forward, still holding the knife. At the top of the stone, where all the cracks met, a small piece wobbled, as if it were balancing on something, then rose and toppled to the floor. After another series of squeaks, a small dark head poked out of the hole, followed by a weirdly angled body. Aragon gripped the knife tighter and held very still. Soon the creature was all the way out of the stone. It stayed in place for a moment, then scuttered into the moonlight.